Right, good evening and welcome. If you do have a mobile phone, if you'd like to put it on silent, please, thank you. Right, massive welcome to Claire Rae Randall, who is a new speaker at St Anne's with her presentation, A Hero's Journey and the Alchemy of Civilisations. Claire is the author of Waking the Monkey, Being the 100th Monkey, which is available on all the W's, lulu.com. Tonight, Claire shares with us an experiential account of the New Age movement, speaks on what is politically in vogue and wrongly perceived as a new concept, that of globalisation, a daring attempt to collate, track and tax everybody, for our safety of course, plus an apparent need to socially engineer our beliefs. Please welcome Claire Randall.
Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you, Rob, and all the crew, who, unfortunately, I don't know all their names, but they seem to have John and Brian and Alex and Rob and Chrissy, and who just put on such an amazing kind of setup here, which I'm most grateful for, and I hope I shall justify all this interest. And also thank you to my friend Carol, who got me here today. Well, we seem to be in a bit of a kind of crisis in the world at the moment, and we always kind of seem to have been in crises, but this one seems to be kind of, everything just seems to be going into meltdown, and I've been watching this really since the 90s, and when I was involved in a New Age camp movement known as the 100th Monkey, and it was really started me out somewhere completely different from where I've ended up. Let's see if I can just move this on. So I'm concerned about the... Oh, thank you, that's better, yes. I'm very concerned, as Rob suggested in the intro, about the conditioning, and as a psychologist, I'm very interested in actually what we bring to the table, our evolutionary drives, and this is why I've subtitled it Evolutionary Drives versus Social Conditioning, because the New Age movement that I was involved in the 90s, I kind of came to the conclusion in the end, after writing my book about it, Waking the Monkey, that actually it was kind of the wrong way round, because what it seemed to be wanting to do was create a world where everybody kind of converged on agreement, and I realised this was impossible, and I will go on to this, explain this later on. Now, how are we? Just a minute. Is that? Oh, this is it. Yes, here we are. Yes, and the way that these meditation camps in the 90s worked was to they were titled An Experiment in Consciousness, and the idea was to create morphic fields of resonance in consciousness where people could remotely affect resolution of conflict in distant places. Now, you may recall that the 90s was the era when we were all starting to hear about remote viewing, and this was in the same kind of thing. And I think there is something to it, but it kind of goes off the rails, I think, a little bit. And one of the things that we did was we would sit around we would meditate, and then we would sit around in a circle called an alting or an all-thingy circle, which is like a parliament, Norse word for parliament. And we would try to seek understanding of the issues that we had dealt with, thereby hoping to create a 100th monkey effect. But it became clear to me eventually that there is a big difference between people coming to understand an issue and everybody coming to agree with it, with each other about it. And this is something which is sort of so blindingly obvious that nonetheless it's been overlooked, and I think we still have this situation actually very much today. But anyway, so when I was at the camp, I found myself going through, because there was something about my core vibration that just couldn't conform. And try as I might, I found myself turned through this experience, this adventure of something triggering me. You hear a lot about people being triggered, and I had to go through with it, I had to deal with it, and in the end of it, I found that I'd increased what social scientists call agency. Agency is the sense that you have a power to change things, and that this is really what we all so much need to learn about. Now, before I'd got involved in this stuff, which I think is very much, it's part of, I'll come to this, but I think it's part of the New World Order distraction thing to get you concerned about things going on in remote places, when initially we should be thinking about our own sphere of influence. And not only myself, but I think one thing that oh yes, that's my book. This is the front cover from the book. We were in a field, it was a huge field full of geodesic domes, and it was all extremely new agey, and I think this picture has rather captured it very well. I'll go on to the next. And so I went through this rite of passage which brought me to a kind of awareness of my own increased agency. And oh yes, here we are. Now, the hero's journey, well, it wasn't until after I'd completed writing the book that I realised that I had actually gone through something which was very akin to what has become known as the hero's journey. The term, I think, has been coined by Joseph Campbell, who was a philosopher and anthropologist who died about 20 years ago, I think. And the hero's journey, the character of Luke Skywalker was apparently based on Joseph Campbell's hero's journey, and you have a naive, the naive young person gets this sense of a call to adventure. I did myself when I heard about this camp. There was something in me that thought, I've got to be involved in this world healing. Wow, it sounds so amazing, and it was supposed to be involved with extraterrestrials and everything, and that's a whole other story that I may not even get onto tonight. And then you go through this cycle where you go past the threshold, and then I got to the camp and I started meeting these people, and the world started turning into a more numinous kind of reality, and we were meditating all the time, and everything was starting to become very metaphysical and symbolic and everything. And then, so you get your mentor and your helper, and I had both of these. I had a rather good meditation teacher and a completely crazy guide called the Barmy Swami. There's plenty about him in the book. And then you fall into the abyss. I fell into this situation that really upset me, and I was treated unfairly, and it all triggered me off, and I went through this whole process that eventually led to my transformation. In fact, there's often in these heroes' journeys, you will find that they're actually a repetition. It's a bit like in the end of Alien, the end of the Alien movies. Every time when Ripley thinks she's finally got rid of the alien, there's always a comeback, and you often get these. And then the hero achieves some atonement. They'll have kind of dealt with some burden that they did. And I myself, actually, I broke my nicotine addiction, and I've never smoked tobacco since, because this was such an intense experience of crisis in myself. And then you return, and you are an empowered person. They've been through your rite of passage, and you've overcome it. And this is present in a lot of heroic literature. The Odyssey and the Labours of Hercules are sort of cyclic versions of this, the Arthurian cycles, the Holy Grail. One thing I'm very interested about is the fact that Tolkien and his work became ascendant almost immediately before the New Age did. And a lot of people who got into New Ageism were people who had been fascinated by Tolkien, and certainly for myself. And we had this movement in the 70s. There was the emergence of what I would call New Ageism, the human potential movement, Maslow, Carl Rogers, but also slightly more offbeat stuff. And then this kind of bled into the channeling movement, onto that a bit in the future. And some of these people were also involved with social engineering and military intelligence, because there were people who were involved in this who went right back to the 1950s with people like Aldous Huxley, Andrea Pucharich, who was a CIA person. They were interested in socially engineering the future. So all these subjects I put here, they all have an input into this social engineering agenda, which is, I believe, subverting evolutionary drives. I'll move on to the next one. Yes, and this is when we were at the 100th Monkey event. There was very much, I don't know if anybody here has heard of the Earhart Seminar Training. It was a kind of slightly infamous psychodrama kind of movement in the States. It was one of these California psychotherapy movements. But they were also quite constraining on people, and the kind of rather directed and a directive approach of the 100th Monkey was very much drawn from these Earhart Seminar trainings, because some of the organisers had been with them in the 70s and 80s. And the idea was that you pressure cooked these world issues. We would intensely meditate and discuss Bosnia or Palestine as the issues were at the moment at the time, and in the intention of having some remote effect on what was taking place in these far distant places. Now, I think we're all familiar with the concept of the importance of 2012, or at least as something that was put forward there were people like Jose Arguellez, who were also involved with some of these military intelligence people. I was rather surprised to find out recently that Jose Arguellez, who was the principal propagator of interest in 2012, as far back as the 1980s when I first came across it. He had actually been involved with Marilyn Ferguson, who had written a book called The Aquarian Conspiracy in the late 70s. And this was basically acknowledging that a lot of this New Age stuff was kind of almost made up out of whole cloth. That there was a that it was being kind of constructed. I mean, we had people like Andrei Puharich running channeling groups which had kind of dubious provenance, we might say, but in complicated ways, because it's not just that these were fakes, but it seems to look like there may have been what would probably now be called archontic entities, messing around with these people because, they're taking remote viewing, quite seriously. So anyway, the thing is that we seem to have also got into, well, we've had false predictions, of course, because there was obviously all this massive hype up for 2012, and nothing kind of apparently happened. I mean, obviously there was the bizarre Roland Emmerich movie, there was a lot of other stuff, suggestions that there might be some kind of world event, and it was all a bit of a damp squib. But if you take the focus back a little bit, I would suggest that we have been moving into some kind of new aeon. I would actually suggest that we're currently actually going through some kind of what I would call a fractal time event, but I think that's going to need a little bit of explanation. Yes. Well, this is an example of a fractal curve. Now, I hope I'm not going to be stretching people's imagination too hard, but I think that, I'm quite into the idea that mathematical rules and also things like chaos theorem can be applied to human affairs. And when you get systems, which I'll be coming on to systems in a bit, systems tend to oscillate around stable homeostasis situations, and then something will hit them, and then suddenly it'll go into a different system. And I'm inclined to think that this is what we've been going through in the last few years, because there seems to be a kind of massive build-up of chaos, which is currently being kind of released at the moment, but also people are responding to it. And of course, so let's see. There we go. Yes, right. This is an example of an asymptote, and this is another example. Unfortunately, you can't see that one quite so well, but I'll take that back. Now, I hope this is not stretching your mathematical imagination too much, but I came across this idea first in Robert Anton Wilson, I think it was The Cosmic Trigger in about 1980, and he pointed out that there was an increase in what you might call novel activity, and this was an idea that was picked up by Terence McKenna. But this was in 1980, so it was well before Terence McKenna's Time Wave Zero. And so Robert Anton Wilson, his prediction was that this curve would hit what's known as an asymptote, which basically it goes to infinity. So basically what he was saying is that around about 2012, because this was a date that, I don't know if he was even aware of this was before the Jose Arguelles publicity about 2012, but he said that between 2012 and 2016, on a purely mathematical basis, we would go through some kind of breakthrough event, or, well, no, breakthrough event's not quite the right term, but some kind of event which we would kind of move into a new level of activity, because the level of activity that was going on would be so just, if you look at the world, you know, literally what we're getting now is, you know, infinite novelty, so much novelty that was turning into chaos, which is the infinite, you know, the axis going up to infinity.